It's the Jersey Blitz, NJ.com's high school football podcast. Hello, Jersey football fans. I'm Dan Long, and on today's episode, I'll be joined by NJ.com football beat writers Joe Zadalis, Ryan Patty, and Kevin Minnick, as we'll talk about Rumson Fairhaven's blitz through the Shore Conference to begin 2025, the chaos that's happened in North Jersey football. We'll also have a Week 1 recap of South Jersey pigskin action, and I'll ask the guys who is the number one team that has surprised them each so far to begin this season. Our writers will also give their analysis up and down the NJ.com top 20. And finally, we'll break down the huge matchup this week between number 1 Bergen Catholic and number 3 Winslow down in South Jersey. So starting us off is our own Joe Zadalis. And Joe, how impressive has Rumson Fairhaven's start been to you, as they are the top dogs in the Shore Conference? And is that the case in your mind?
Well, as for the top dogs, at this point, I'm going to say no. I still have Red Bank Catholic ranked ahead of them, simply because in my mind, Red Bank Catholic has the best win so far. That's the 21-0 Week 0 victory over Tonsver North. But Rumson has certainly opened my eyes. As I go through here, Dan, I will throw some factoids at you. And while it will sound like I'm giddy over this Rumson team, it's more a case of amazement. This is a team that lost 8 first-team all-shore players from last year, including their all-time leading passer, their 2 leading receivers, their leading tackler, and their best player in the secondary. Now, as sports writers, we hear coaches say all the time, we don't rebuild, we reload. And I think much of the time, Dan, that's bluster. One place where that actually happens is Rumson. Rumson has been in a sectional final every year. There has been a sectional final since 2013. There were no playoffs in 2020 because of COVID. 11 straight years in a sectional final. Rumson is 8-3 in those games, alternating back and forth between groups 2 and 3. During that 11-year period, Rumson averages 9.9 wins per season. They've won 3 straight sectional titles. They've been to 3 straight group finals, and they have a 15-game winning streak, which I believe is tied for the longest in the state. And they have demolished 2 really good football teams here in the Shore Conference. Brick Memorial, which was our number 16 team last week, they beat 35-7, and in Week 0, they beat Point Pleasant Borough 34-0. So after the first game, we're talking to Jeremy Schulte, and the 3 writers asked him, Jeremy, are you surprised at the way, your 2 new quarterbacks and all your new kids have played? And he looked at us with this sheepish grin and said, no, not really. And he wasn't being cocky. He was being honest. He goes, I see this happen every year, so I guess I just expect it. And just a little perspective on the Rumson program, Dan. Rumson is a Group 2 school. According to enrollment figures last year, they have 849 kids in the building. So we'll say half is boys. That's 414. Rumson gets 30-some% of its boys' population to play football. They trot out 100 kids every week. Can you imagine if Hunterdon Central, Elizabeth, Shawnee, Passaic got 30% of their male population to play football? Some of those teams would have 200 kids. Rumson is truly a football factory. They are an assembly line. One kid graduates and they bring out another who looks and plays just like him, or at least that's the way it seems to me. Jeremy Schulte has said this defense is the fastest he's ever had and may be better than the one they had last year. And that was a defense that didn't lose in 13 games a year ago.
And that's a big reason why, Joe, that they took apart Brick Memorial based on their defense scoring touchdowns last week.
They are so physical up front. They maintain gap integrity. Their linebackers roam sideline to sideline without being hit. And they have so much quickness on the perimeter, plays are being turned back inside. In last week's win over Brick Memorial, and you were there, Dan, we had it live, Rumson recovered 4 fumbles and intercepted a pass. In week 0, Brick Memorial had 374 total yards against Rumson at 212. 58 of those came on one play. Without that 58 yards, Brick Memorial averaged 2.7 yards per rush. You're going to win a lot of football games doing that. In week 0, when they shut out Point Pleasant Borough, Rumson shut out Point Pleasant Borough for the first time in 47 games. Point Borough hadn't been shut out since 2020. And now you add in this two-headed quarterback tandem, and between them, they can actually do more within Rumson's offense than Owen O'Toole did for the last 3 years. And all he did was took them to 3 straight sectional championships. Now, this week, Rumson plays Homedale. Shouldn't be any real trouble, but we'll really see what that defense has, Dan, because they're going to go up against one of the most prolific quarterbacks in New Jersey, in Homedale senior Jack Cannon. Cannon had figured in 5 TDs last week in a win over Donovan Catholic. He already has 3,300 passing yards and 1,800 rushing yards. If in fact Rumson is able to shut him down, now shut him down might be holding him to 200 combined yards. I think there's a clear-cut favorite in Group 2. And as for whether RFH is better than RBC, we'll find out for sure on October 10th, Dan.
So it's going to be fun to see how Rumson Fairhaven continues to possibly roll early on in the season with a defense that's impenetrable and an offense that is quite deadly as well. So that's taking a look at what's been going on with Rumson Fairhaven down the shore. And up north, Ryan Patty, as we welcome you onto the Jersey Blitz, it's just been utter chaos in the first couple of weeks of 2025.
Yeah, Dan. So I covered on Friday Pascack Valley at Westwood, and I got to Westwood High School, and I see them take the field, and I see PV take the field, and I see Kai and Marley Smith taped up, and I was told by their trainer that Adam Shaw had an injury that was preventing him to throw the ball. He was still everything as advertised at linebacker. He had 19 tackles. We're all very skeptical sometimes when we see 19 tackles in the stat sheet, but boy, I could tell you he made 19 tackles. But he was limited offensively to just running back. He played a bit of the Y and in the slot, and then Wildcat quarterback, and that changed everything for PV. I'm not taking anything away from Westwood because they played phenomenal, and they're a team that's probably going to win a playoff game or two again. I maybe sold them a little bit short coming into the year, but PV needs to get healthy as soon as possible, and I think they will soon enough. But I mean, what more can you say about Westwood? I mean, this looked like typical Westwood, running the ball, hard-nosed defense. I thought they were the more physical and conditioned team on Friday when all was said and done. And sophomore quarterback Bruno Vega was outstanding. Amazing touchdown throw on 4th and 17 to Nick Klein, Steve Klein's younger brother, that put Westwood on the board, tied the game. And then he broke the tie in the 4th quarter with a 49-yard touchdown run. Just a signature win for the Cardinals, and like exact revenge for what happened last year in week 1, because it was 21-7 Pascack Valley last year in week 1.
What are some of the teams that you feel, if you had to be a stock market broker, which are the stocks that are rising right now that might interest you to buy?
Yeah, Dan, I'm looking at 2 teams. The first one is Wayne Hills. And the big question is, is Wayne Hills back? And for now, I would have to say yes. And there's a lot of coaches who are speaking very highly of this program right now after 2 impressive wins, one against Wheat Ridge in Colorado, and then the other against West Essex, a perennial power in Group 3 in overtime last week. This is a program that's, fought the fight with Wayne Valley and DePaul over players every year. And in the past, they've won that battle a lot, but not recently. This is their first 2-0 start since 2020. It's been a couple lean years for the Patriots, but they might be turning it around. And, they have some winnable games here before the schedule beefs up. But you think back to names like, Njoku, Devere, the Hayeks, Joe Rondi, Sharkey at quarterback there, and a bunch of other kids. But, all those guys, sectional title winning players. But now there's, Fitzsimmons, Wolf, they have a two quarterback system there. Zakarski, Van Hook, Bacchioni, Demikoff, the Wayne's son, Troy. These could be, the next couple kids here, that deliver hardware to this program. And we'll find out soon, about those guys as their schedule gets tougher. And then another team is Wes Morris. And, here's Kevin Henley at it again, just racking up more wins and against good teams, too. I mean, the Wolfpack 2-0 to start the year. They beat Morris Knowles last week in a shootout, 41-31. They ran for a ton of yards, over 250 out of that wing T offense. And Morris Knowles ran for over 350 and 5 touchdowns. So, you might want to see a little more, 4 touchdowns. So you might want to see a little more out of Wes Morris defensively, but 2-0 and against a tough schedule. The other team they beat was Mendham, who last year, I believe, was a 2 seed in their section. So Wayne Hills, Wes Morris, those are the teams. If I'm, on Wall Street, I'm investing in.
What are some of the other stories that have caught your eye so far after that last week 1 action in the North?
Yeah, Dan, I have 2 more stories here, and really cool ones, really, just heartwarming ones, really fascinating ones. Passaic Valley, against Caldwell, walks them off there in week 1. Senior Dante Benvenuti, he's the AD's son, also an all-group player for us, does a bit of wide receiver, linebacker, kicks for them. He walked it off with a 45-yard field goal, as time expired. Not a lot of kids have legs like that in high school. Some do, but not a lot. There's certainly not that many up north. The video is on Passaic Valley's athletics Twitter page. They have the green lights there when they score, so it was a pretty cool scene there when that happened. And that was an amazing game that went back and forth. Second year in a row, Passaic Valley's opened the year with a win over Caldwell. Then you had Bergenfield beating Paramus for its first win after the death of Coach Rob Violante, who passed away in May in that car accident. And their new head coach, Joe Lappy, he's a good friend of mine outside the industry. And class of 2014 Bergenfield graduate. He played under Violante. And Dan, I can't tell you how much this means to him and the Bergenfield community to win for Coach V. And this was their first home game, without him. So it just really turned out to be a special day there on Saturday in Bergenfield.
You always love with those type of things. Obviously, you get to cover the ins and outs of the sport, but it's not just the X's and O's and the final scores, but it's things like that bring a community together that make it just an even better story. And it sounds like that was the case in Bergenfield. So that's some of the action that's been going on in North Jersey, according to Ryan Patty. And now we shift gears. We head down south and we bring in Kevin Minnick on Jersey Blitz. And Kevin, what about your recap here for week 1 action that happened down in South Jersey with a couple of early wins for some of the big name teams?
Yeah, Dan, there's some teams that have struggled in recent seasons that have traditionally been extremely strong in South Jersey. But off the 2-0 starts, Cherokee, Adelcy, McCandon East Side, formerly Woodrow Wilson. These are programs that through the years have been sectional champions multiple times. And for whatever reason, they've struggled a little bit, in the last year or so. Camden Eastside didn't win a game last year. Delsey was a team who, went into the sectional playoffs. I believe they had 2 or 3 wins, and that's kind of unheard of as far as Delsey football is concerned. So, like I said, there's some teams, established programs that are off to nice starts, and then there's also a handful of other teams, that maybe they don't get a lot of recognition, they don't get a lot of headlines, and they've struggled in recent years, but they're off to 2-0 starts, which is great for those particular teams. A team like Cumberland, a team like Deptford, Collingswood, Gateway, Sterling. These are teams that are, in the last handful of years have been below average when you look at the records. And for whatever reason, they just can't put things together. And some qualify for the postseason, a lot of them don't. But for these particular programs to get off to such a great start this year, even though we are only 2 weeks in, for some teams, 2 wins was all they had last year. The 2 wins may be more than they had last year. So, that just, I guess, can create a little bit of a buzz, not only around the team, but around school. Now maybe there's some more students that are interested in coming out to see the football game on a Friday night, taking a little bit more interest in what their classmates are doing. And, on the whole, that can be nothing but special for South Jersey football as a whole.
And then there's a surprising team in your area that has some marquee wins already to its resume, knocking off Mainland and Millville. Who is that surprising team?
Yeah, you look at Atlantic City, and coming into the season, Atlantic City is always a program that has very talented athletes. They're quick, they're aggressive. They're city kids, but they get themselves into a tough regular season schedule. They get a loss here, maybe hang their head. Next thing you know, that loss snowballs into 2 or 3. But Atlantic City's been pretty good the last couple of years, and Keenan Wright has done a nice job of turning around that program. And here we go, Atlantic City's 2-0, and to be quite honest with you, I don't think most people would thought they would be 2-0 after they beat Mainland in the opener. Okay, maybe they have a shot against Millville, but Millville's done this, that, and the other over the last 4 or 5 years. And they'll hang with them, but something will happen, and then Millville will come out with a W. And this year it was Atlantic City. So that's definitely a team to keep an eye on as we continue to progress throughout the year.
It's a nice little segue now to each one of our writers here, guys. Name for me one team that surprised each of you so far this season. Kevin, is it kind of piggybacking off of our last segment? Is it Atlantic City, or are there other teams as well that kind of have surprised you just 2 games in?
Yeah, I don't think, 2 games is not a substantial sample, but yes, the team that really jumps out to me is that Atlantic City team. The last couple years, Peaky Roseboro, Shanae, DeGraff and Raid, known as Ice Cup. I guess that's basically how everybody knows them, as Ice Cup. Those 2 guys dictated pretty much everything for that football team, and they had enjoyed tremendous success. But they're both gone now. They're both playing college football. But who was going to step up and take over for them? And there are guys that obviously every program has kids that are going to now step up, whether they'd like to or not, or to have to kind of fill those roles. And they've done a nice job in 2 games, to beat Mainland, which was a neutral site game in Delaware, was a big feather in their cap. Mainland had been a championship pedigree the last several years. And, no, Atlantic City doesn't have a shot against Mainland. Well, they opened up a lot of eyes. And then, like we said last week with that game with Millville, Millville had an opportunity to kind of right the ship after falling to RV in the battle at the beach. Atlantic City trailed for a good part of that game and found a way to win. So, yeah, when it comes to South Jersey right now, Atlantic City jumps off the chart for me.
Whenever you say it or whenever Bill Evans says it, I always smile. I love that nickname, Ice Cup. That is something so unique.
Ice Cup took over the nickname game, I guess, in South Jersey football for a good 2 seasons. So yeah, I mean, pretty much, I don't think very many people even knew what his first name or his last name was, but they certainly knew who Ice Cup was.
So that's a look at Atlantic City as the surprising team. Ryan, who's been surprising to you up north in the Super Football Conference?
Yeah, Dan, it's the Bayonne Bees, and they look as good as they have in a long time. Jason Bernstein's kind of our Hudson County guy, and we were talking about it recently, and he's been amazed with how they look. And Morris Knowles beat them week 0 in a competitive game, a 1-score game, but they had a comeback win over Elizabeth last week. That was just sensational. And Elizabeth is one of the teams that Mike Kinney covers for us, and Mike had them pegged as a fringe top 20 team. For Bayonne, I mean, Nico Sampson looks the part of quarterback. Chance Fisher, he's been a stud over the last couple of years at running back. And then the coach's son, Jerome Hayes Jr., huge pick 6 in the game against Elizabeth that gave Bayonne the lead in the fourth quarter. He's a stud at both wideout and linebacker, and he's committed to Long Island University. Xavier Paulino was an all Group 5 guy for us last year, double-digit sacks. They don't even have Deion McKinnon yet. He had 8 interceptions and was also a start receiver. Jared Edwards, he's another stud on that team who plays both ways. So, there's serious like junior and senior talent here. And Piscataway took it to them a bit last year in the first round of the playoffs. I was there. It wasn't, an embarrassment or anything like that, but, Piscataway hit some big plays and they ended up winning by a couple scores. And I walked away from that game thinking, you know what, like Bayonne's kind of just a year away. All these kids are juniors, sophomores, and here they are. They have Union City next week, and Union City has never really gotten challenged, at least of late, by the public schools in Hudson County, and the Soaring Eagles this time might get challenged this week.
Very interesting to see Bayonne emerge as a surprising team so far, and we'll see if they continue to make a little noise when they go up against Union City. And Joe Z, who's been surprising you so far down the shore?
Well, Dan, we've had a few teams that have, at least to me, been a surprise. Freehold Township's off to a 2-0 start after losing, their 5,000 career yard passer. Central Regional is 2-0 after losing their leading rusher and leading passer, and Southern's 2-0. So Central and Southern will play this Friday night in Bayville. But the team that's really caught my eye has been Lakewood. The Piners are 2-0, and while J.P. Stevens and Keyport will never be mistaken for Bergen Catholic and Don Bosco, Lakewood has 2 wins, and they've had over 500 yards of offense in both games. So, I think it's also amazing, given all the negativity that surrounds that school district. They're in the news today for a decision by a court judge and all kinds of other things. And these kids and LJ Clark just go out and work their tails off and play football. But, Lakewood lost its all-time leading rusher, Ramel Anderson. He was a second-team All-State selection for us last year. So they've replaced him with a sophomore named Abel Martinez. I think it's a great name. And so, he's rushed. He rushed for 106 yards last week. They have a tailback who just went over 1,000 yards named Zion Jones. It is a talented sophomore class that this team is built around. Now, you're not going to see Lakewood win a state title, but you sure as heck could see them going 3-0. They have winless Pinelands this week. They're in a division that a 36-man team can compete against. And so far, what they've been able to do has been very impressive to me, Dan.
So we go from some surprises to now more of the mainstays, because we're going to start to break down the top 20 teams in our NJ.com top 20 poll. And Ryan, when looking at some of these things, it's kind of gone chalk up north with a lot of the teams that are in the top 20. So when you look at some of these teams that are non-public powers and they've had their struggles out of state, such as DePaul and Delbarton, what do you have to make of that when you're looking at them in the whole grand scheme of things in our top 20?
Yeah, for DePaul, I don't see the week 1 loss to Good Counsel as, I'm not sending off, alarm bells at that. They lost a 21-20 game to one of the better programs on the East Coast. They beat Good Counsel last year, 28-17. It was one of the more signature wins for DePaul, in the Nick Campanelli era, maybe, going back to John McKenna's days. So I'm not ready to panic just yet on DePaul. I think they're going to be fine. They'll bounce back. It's kind of, a shrug your shoulders, oh, well, on to week 2. But as for Delbarton, Donovan and I had a feeling that there could be moments like this year where they show they're a rebuilding team. And, I think that's what we saw on Saturday. They lost to Malvern Prep from PA 29-0. And Malvern Prep is a very good program out of Southeast PA, traditionally one of the best on the East Coast every year. And, I just think this iteration of Delbarton for now is just not on that level yet. And, we know how good of a coach Brian Bowers is. He's going to figure it out. He'll get them back to where they were, just 2 years ago as a championship contender in non-public A. I mean, they were on MetLife Stadium's turf with Bergen there just 2 years ago. So they graduate a lot of those kids. He's been in this situation before where he's kind of rebuilding the program. I think they'll be back. And for Del Barton right now, it's kind of just all about finding some positive moments, even in games where they're outmatched like this past week, and just building on those positive moments.
And for DePaul, no worries at all for the Spartans, seeing that they've now lost only 2 games over the last 2 years, each by a lone point. So I don't think, the sky is falling there on Alps Road in Wayne. Kevin, looking at the top 20 teams down south, they've kind of lived up to the hype.
Yeah, so far so good. We really expected a lot out of Winslow and knew that the first 3 weeks we'll tell a little bit about them. They opened up with IMG and really performed well and really did not walk off the field embarrassed. Last week's game against Highland, they won that one going away, and obviously they have a big test this week against Bergen. But Winslow was going to be the team to beat in South Jersey, remains a team to beat in South Jersey, and I think that they're going to give Bergen a real test come Friday. And some of the other teams, Rancocas Valley and Washington Township and Glassboro, 3 teams all enjoyed tremendous success last year. All 3 brought back a ton of kids this year. We expected a lot out of them, and we set the bar high for them. And so far, so good. Obviously, like we said before, two games is not a great massive sample, but in those 2 games for those 3 teams, they've clearly taken care of business. And same way for St. Augustine. They came in and hit the road in their opener, and then played another road game last week with Paul VI and shut them out. So to this point, who we thought would be where they're at, that's where they're at. Atlantic City, Camden coming into the rankings in the last week or so. They're 2 teams that Camden we knew was good. It was just a matter of maybe just show it a little bit to really solidify things, and they've done that. A team that's been to 3 straight sectional finals under Rob Hinson, and then obviously we talked about Atlantic City, their 2 wins. Coming, to start the year, really surprising people and deserving their spot in the rankings. Mainland and Millville, the 2 other teams that started in the top 20 that are now out, on the outside looking in, still have a chance to make some hay in South Jersey football and potentially get themselves back into the state's elite. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a few signature wins along the way to do that. But like you said, the teams that we did think were going to be good have not disappointed so far.
Joe, looking down the shore, we're going to be covering this week as one of our games to broadcast Brick Memorial. They just fell out of the top 20. What do you make of them? And also, we have RBC ahead of Rumson Fairhaven. Is that fair right now at this point in the season?
Well, I'll answer the Brick Memorial question first, Dan, since that's what you asked first. What I expect this week, I do think their outstanding dual threat quarterback, Jason LaQuara, will play. Head coach Walt Curry listed him as questionable today. However, my sources within the Shore Conference and around Brick Memorial say he will play. He's been out with an illness the last 2 weeks. Memorial did not miss him in week 1 when they crushed Wall, but they sure as hell did last week against Rumson. However, what has gone on in the Shore this week, I had Tonsver North in the preseason poll and preseason top 20. They lost, they're out. By the way, I think a real important game for Tonsver North is Friday night. They go across Route 37 and play at 0-2 Monsignor Donovan. The only question about that game is the status of Donovan's quarterback. The Seton Hall transfer, we're not sure. And Dan Curcione, the head coach at Donovan, is playing it close to the vest. Do I think it's fair to have Red Bank Catholic ahead of Rumson at this time? Well, I don't know. The dope who ranks the short conference teams didn't even have Rumson in the top 20 in the preseason. But I do think it's fair, as I said earlier on this podcast. I think Red Bank Catholic has the best win, and that was beating Tom's River North on opening night. Um, Red Bank Catholic did not look all that great against Middletown, Delaware last week. I do not know how good Middletown, Delaware really is, but Red Bank Catholic is playing really good football. Their freshman tailback, Greg Kemp, had another 100-yard game. He's got 258 in 2 games. Their freshman quarterback, Raheem Rivera, has 221 yards in his first 2 games. And let's face it, those 2 kids are only going to get better and better. And RBC is playing really good defense. A different kind of defense than Rumson, very physical up front, of linebackers who come downhill. So for me, yes, it's fair at this point. Again, does it stay that way? I don't know, but it'll all be settled on the field in Rumson on October 10th when RBC and RFH play for Ridge Road bragging rights, Dan.
So that's a look at the top 20 analysis from our 3 football beat writers. And now finally on this episode, we get to that juicy matchup that we've been thinking about even dating back to last week. It's Winslow versus Bergen Catholic, a rare time, Ryan, that we have a matchup that features the top public school, the top private school, and you have number 1 Bergen Catholic making the trek down to South Jersey to play at Winslow. How rare is this type of matchup here in New Jersey in this day and age?
I mean, Dan, you work in the building at Bergen, and you've been there long enough now to know that like this just doesn't happen, right? It's kind of like history being made here. I mean, it's not only just North against South Jersey. Like the North Jersey non-pubs don't even schedule like good North public schools. Like the coaches are all friends with each other. They say hi at SFC Media Day, stuff like that. But when it comes to scheduling each other, like they would just hang up the phone instantly. And that's even if they pick up. So this simply just doesn't happen. And some interesting facts here, some nuggets. The last time Bergen scheduled a public school from New Jersey was in 2019 when they traveled to Irvington. And before that, it was Chuck Johnson's Ridgewood teams that Nunzio would schedule in 2014 and in years prior. Bergen, funny enough, played on grass last week in Florida against West Boca. But the last time they played on grass out of state was in 2018 against Grayson from Georgia. That was the first game of Vito's tenure. Then the last time they played on grass in state was when Jabril Peppers was at Paramus Catholic over a decade ago. And that's not even diving into this matchup, which is the state's top team in the middle of a 4-year championship run, going up against what could be one of the best, if not the best, public school team ever in Winslow, just speaking to how they've been dominating, some of South Jersey's better teams. So with Winslow, this isn't your average public school team. I mean, they went down 21-0 IMG, and they threw haymakers back, and they hung around deep into the third quarter. And we all saw the Group 4 final, and with all due respect to P-Berg, those are 2 teams in different tiers. This game's going to mean a lot to Winslow. I think it's going to be a great environment, great atmosphere, and a great game, as Kevin will tell you here in a second. But if there's any team that this means more to than Winslow, Dan, and you know it, it's Bergen Catholic. They have a 26-game in-state win streak that they, have a lot of pride in. The Crusader Crazies are going to be down there in droves, and there's going to be so many faces down there in South Jersey. Like, who the heck are these people? Like, these guys are on another planet. But that's just what Bergen Catholic does. I mean, the program hears all the chatter, and whether it's football, basketball, chess, checkers, like they make everything their Super Bowl, and I think that's what you're going to see on Friday.
Kevin, it was something interesting when I first heard of this game being locked in last year, to know that not only that these 2 worlds collide and you're getting the best versus the best in terms of public and private and getting these teams together, but to hear that Bergen Catholic was willing to also get on the road and travel down to South Jersey. Now, Bergen Catholic travels very well. This is going to still have a full home field advantage, South Jersey feel to this one. What is this atmosphere going to be like in your mind when you're getting an opportunity? You always hear about the Catholic schools up north, but to have them come here to take on arguably the best team that South Jersey has produced in quite some time.
Yeah, I call them the fence hangers, and these are the people that a lot of older guys and guys that don't want to sit in the stands. They'll just hang around the fence around the field. And most football, at least a lot of in South Jersey, I can attest to that, have a lot of fences around the field, and there's huge crowds that'll just hang around the fence to watch the game. The stands are going to be packed. Winslow does a nice job at home of packing their side. Bergen Catholic side stands are significantly large for a visiting team as well. So if they bring a crowd, that side's going to be packed. I'm interested in seeing how many fans are going to be hanging on the fence, because this game, when it was first announced, it was kind of like, okay, we'd love to see it, but something's going to happen. This is not going to go down. There's one of these two teams is going to back out. Something's going to happen. There's going to be a better opportunity. Well, guess what? Turns out both teams stuck to the plan, and we're going to have the game that if you are a true New Jersey football fan, especially this season, you want to see. Winslow, Bill Belton wants to be, he wants to put his team on a national type of pedestal. He wants to play these kind of games. After the IMG game, he thought they took a step forward in that respect, but they're not there yet. To take on Bergen at home on a Friday night, I honestly thought the game would be moved to Saturday at like 1:00, but Friday night at 6:00, that place is going to be bonkers by the time the kickoff starts. And you're going to have people going back and forth, and there's going to be oohs and ahs on every single play. This is a game where, Winslow is famous for its walking tacos at its concession stand. Get the walking taco at like 5:45, because you're not going to want to get up once the clock hits 6, because every single play is going to take on even more added significance in my opinion. It was like watching the Super Bowl last year, when the Eagles are playing, and I'm an Eagles guy. So when watching the Eagles, your mind is locked in on every play, whether it's offense or defense. It's going to be the same way here, because every play is going to be so significant.
Ryan, what does Bergen Catholic have to do to continue their win streak in state against Winslow? What do you see them having to do X's and O's wise on offense, and then as well on defense, where they might have the best defense in the Garden State?
Yeah, before I start breaking things down, I thought Kevin did a great job breaking it down. Just the atmosphere. And Kevin's a basketball guy, covers basketball in the winter. It's going to be like a packed gym, like just back and forth yelling after it's going to be sensational. But in terms of X's and O's, I mean, it's fascinating here, Dan. I mean, offensively, I think it starts and ends with the ground game for Bergen. They haven't ran the ball that well this year, 55 for 150. That's less than 3 yards a carry. I know, Coach Vito wants to do a lot better than that. Granted, it's against elite competition, but, 5 seniors up front. You got Calhoun and Kane in the backfield there. Walker Snee, he's been a bit of a Josh Allen for them, like a bulldozing running quarterback. Used situationally. Their identity is running the ball, and it's always been Vito's identity. I think you have to be encouraged with Trey Tagliaferri, how he's, throwing the ball, taking care of the ball. They've stretched the field very well. They could do a lot of play action stuff with him if the run's working, but we've seen it, and we've seen it 2 weeks in a row now with him. But I think there's an advantage up front that they can try to exploit. It's what IMG did in the fourth quarter. It's how they put Winslow away. And I think that's ultimately what Bergen has to do offensively. But defensively, I mean, if you watch the Winslow game against IMG, they are really, really hard to defend. They'll spread you out. They're a 7-on-7 type offense, and they were just kind of at points in the game, they were just picking IMG apart. And they have a lot of team speed. An all-state quarterback in Jalen Parker. He makes the right throws. He makes the difficult throws. Great decision maker. And he also showed you in that game against IMG that he can use his legs. So, Bergen might want to put a spy out there on most snaps. But Bergen's going to have to find a way to give Jackson Vaughn, Jermaine Kinsler, all those guys up front enough time to get after Parker and, kind of confuse him and alter him. And it's probably going to have to happen without blitzing, because with all those, empty sets that Winslow runs, Bergen's have a lot of DBs out there, a lot of dime packages, quarter packages. So I don't know how much they're going to be able to blitz, but a mix of man and zone. We'll see what they do. I'm interested to see what Tony DeBellis does. He's a mastermind. I love seeing him go to work there, as the DC for Bergen. But ultimately, it's going to be all about applying pressure, trying to confuse Parker, because he's all-state quarterback. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the state, at the very least. And as you saw against IMG, he can slice and dice anyone.
Kevin, we talked about this even in breaking down that Winslow IMG game from a couple of weeks ago. Confidence is such a huge part of Winslow's game. They bring this swagger. Sometimes they walk onto the field and they've already won the game because they are so confident in their abilities. This is not going to be one of those normal games down in South Jersey where they have the most talent immediately on the field. How do they translate that confidence into the talent and the execution that could knock off Bergen Catholic from its pedestal?
You're absolutely right. They are a confident bunch, and it starts at the top. Bill Belton is a confident guy. He's confident in his assistants and this team executing its game plan. I think the big thing for them is that maybe they fell behind IMG 21-0. I don't think falling behind Bergen 21-0 is going to be, it's never great, to be honest with you, obviously, but they can't, I don't think they can allow Bergen to kind of dictate the tempo and the momentum, especially early in the game. Like Ryan said, Winslow was at its best when it used the shorter passing game and the athleticism and speed on the outside that they have to take a 3-yard screen pass and turn it into an 8 or 10-yard reception. I think, a lot of times Winslow will look for the big shot. They'll look for the 30 and 40-yard pass. They'll look to throw the ball over the top and have a receiver try to run under it. Jalen Parker has a tremendous arm for a kid who's not that big. I think flat-footed, he could probably throw the ball 70 yards in the air with a tight, perfect spiral. He's that good. So, like I said, the short passing game really, really helped them. And then they were able to generate a couple longer passes against IMG. And I think, that's something that maybe they go to again in this game and let the speed, let the athleticism, play its part. And, Winslow Ryan says Bergen wants to run the ball. Winslow wants to throw the ball. But at the same time, Winslow does have enough quality kids that can run the ball. Nakeem Powell is as tough as they come. So I think he's going to get the ball maybe 8-10 times. He may chew up 6-8 yards a carry if he can. So, while, Winslow is obviously a dominant team when it puts the ball in the air, they're capable of picking up that key first down when they need it on the ground. So I think, it's going to be a challenge. Bill Belton's basic philosophy is if you want to be the man, beat the man. If you want to be the guy, this is the game you want to play in and show that you're the guy. They don't have as many top flight college recruits as Bergen does, but they do have a handful that are very, very good. And, when fans come to games like this and see that kind of talent and watch it, you clearly see the separation between those teams and other teams in the region, other teams in the state. This is one of those games. This is going to be, it is not going to get much better than this, I think, until you come to late October, early November into the state tournament. If you're not ready for this game, and if you're a fan of New Jersey football and you're not paying attention to this game, you are not paying attention to anything. It's going to be a great game. And, I said it before, I said it on somebody else's podcast as well. I will take Winslow to win this game. And if they do, I don't know. Maybe is this the we shocked the world kind of game? I don't know if I'm even willing to go that far because I think Winslow is that good. Now, if they win the game, great. If they don't win the game, Dan, they're not going to walk off the field embarrassed. They know what they were able to do against IMG. Everybody at the Battle of the Beach had an opportunity to see Winslow and to see Bergen. Hey, you watched both games. You decide what you want to do. I'm going out on a limb, if you want to call it on a limb. I like Winslow, and I'm not being a homer, but I think this is an opportunity that has never come around and probably won't come around very often. And I just have this feeling in my gut that Winslow's going to take care of business one way or another. Maybe I'm wrong. We will live to see it, and I will live. If they lose the game, I can live with that too. But for an opportunity to have a game like this on a Friday night in September, when the weather's going to still be nice, you can't ask for anything more than this.
Well, I'm definitely pumped up for this game because of how you guys broke it down in its entirety. I think, Kevin, you have made Vito Campanelli a very happy man with your prediction towards Winslow. I know that he looks for any little thing for motivation, and this team, it's going to be so fun because of, like you said, the different storylines. Winslow wants to pass. Bergen Catholic, maybe with its fastest secondary in school history. The stars are colliding, and kudos to both teams. Kudos to both teams for setting this game up when it has been so easy in the past to just slough it off as, well, non-publics are over here, publics are over here, north and south. This has all the storylines of a fun matchup, and this is only just the beginning of the season in this officially week 2. It's going to be a juicy one to break down then in podcasts to come. So that's coming up on Friday down in Winslow. Number 1 Bergen Catholic, number 3 Winslow, with so much on the line for a regular season game. And a reminder, fans, that from the opening kickoff to the end of the season, NJ.com's award-winning staff of reporters and photojournalists put you in the middle of the football action. For in-depth coverage of all these games we've talked about and other games around the state, including photo galleries, recaps, and stats, be sure to visit NJ.com/HSSports. And a reminder, fans, that we'll continue our broadcast coverage for NJ.com this week. As I mentioned, on Friday night, I'll be down the shore for Point Pleasant Borough taking on Brick Memorial. That's a 6 p.m. kickoff. And then on Saturday, we'll head to Union County as Hillside takes on Summit for a 1 p.m. showdown on Saturday afternoon. NJ.com subscribers can watch those games live and then anytime afterwards on demand, as well as all of our coverage in the first 2 weeks of the season. So I'd like to thank my compatriots, Joe Zadalis, Ryan Patty, and Kevin Minnick for joining us here on the podcast. We'd like to thank David Liss, our engineer, to get us all sorted out here and helping to produce this episode. So for all the guys, I'm Dan Long saying so long, and thanks for listening to the Jersey Blitz. And we'll talk about it next week, breaking down all the action in the Garden State. Take care, everybody.